A warm breeze drifted through the glass doors of the high-rise building, carrying with it the faint hum of the city below. The morning rush of employees streamed into the headquarters of Greystone Enterprises, a towering symbol of prestige and wealth. Interns hustled with clipboards, receptionists smiled brightly, and executives adjusted their TIs, ready to plunge into another demanding day. Among the sea of workers was Jordan Harris, a young black intern in his early 20s. He wasn't dressed in the most expensive suit, his blazer was secondhand, his shoes polished but scuffed, but he carried himself with a quiet determination. Jordan wasn't from privilege. His neighborhood was one where sirens echoed at night and opportunities were scarce. Yet through perseverance, scholarships, and endless nights of studying, he had earned his way into one of the most competitive internship programs in the country. For Jordan, this internship wasn't just a stepping stone, it was survival. His mother worked 2 jobs, his younger sister was still in school, and bills piled up each month like insurmountable walls. If he could impress the team at Greystone Enterprises, he might just secure a permanent role. That hope burned in his chest every time he walked through those gleaming glass doors. The lobby was bustling when Jordan arrived that morning. He had barely settled at the front desk, where interns rotated shifts to assist visitors, when the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A woman stepped out. She was in her 40s, dressed in modest clothes. Nothing about her screamed wealth or corporate power. She clutched a small leather folder to her chest and moved with the kind of hesitancy, her eyes darting toward the reception desk. Jordan noticed something else almost immediately. She wasn't reacting to the sounds around her. Phones rang, heels clicked on marble floors, conversations echoed, but she moved forward as though in silence. Jordan's heart skipped. He recognized the subtle signs. His cousin, back home, had been deaf since birth, and Jordan had spent years learning American Sign Language to communicate with him. The woman approached the desk, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she hesitated, then signed carefully, "Hello, here for an appointment." Without missing a beat, Jordan smiled warmly and signed back, "Welcome. I can help you. Do you know who you're meeting with?" Her eyes widened in surprise. Relief flooded her face, and she nodded quickly. Her hands moved with growing confidence. "Yes, I have a meeting today. My name is Evelyn Carter." Jordan motioned for her to wait just a moment while he checked the visitor list on the computer. Sure enough, there it was, Evelyn Carter, scheduled for a 10 o'clock appointment. The entry didn't list who she was meeting with, just executive office. That was unusual, but Jordan thought nothing of it. He turned back to her, signing gently, "You're right on time. Please, have a seat. I'll let them know you've arrived." Her grateful smile was like a light in the busy lobby. For a moment, Jordan felt a sense of pride he rarely experienced in this cold corporate world. Here was a chance, not just to perform his duties, but to connect, to make someone feel welcome instead of out of place. He knew from his cousin how isolating the world could feel when no one bothered to understand you. As Evelyn sat in the waiting area, Jordan dialed upstairs to alert the executive office of her arrival. The secretary on the other end simply said, "Send her up in 10 minutes. We'll be ready." Jordan passed along the message to Evelyn in sign language. She nodded, content, and began to leaf through her folder. He noticed her hands trembled slightly, as though this meeting carried weight far beyond an ordinary appointment. The minutes passed, and Jordan kept sneaking glances at her. Something tugged at him, curiosity, maybe, or intuition. Who was this woman? Why was she meeting with the executive office instead of a department head? And why did she look as though the world rested on her shoulders? Soon, a sleek elevator dinged open. The secretary stepped out, her eyes scanning the lobby. Jordan stood and signed to Evelyn, "They're ready for you." He guided her toward the elevator, giving her a reassuring smile. She squeezed his hand gently in gratitude before stepping inside. Jordan returned to the desk, but his thoughts stayed with her. He hoped her meeting would go well. Something about her vulnerability had touched him deeply. He didn't know that upstairs, Evelyn Carter was about to sit across from the CEO of Greystone Enterprises himself. And he certainly didn't know that the moment he greeted her in sign language, his life had shifted in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The CEO's office was an expanse of polished mahogany, steel, and glass. At its center sat Richard Greystone, a man known for his sharp intellect and sharper business deals. He was feared more than he was loved, respected more than he was trusted. Few ever saw him without his armor of power and command. When Evelyn entered, Richard rose from behind his desk. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, flickered with something soft or something rare. "Evelyn," he said quietly, almost reverently, "it's been so many years." She smiled faintly, though her lips didn't form words. Instead, she raised her hands and signed, "Hello, Richard." And for the first time in a very long while, the ruthless CEO pushed aside his empire and became just a man again, one with a past that was about to collide with the present. Downstairs, Jordan remained unaware that the woman he had kindly greeted wasn't just any visitor. She was the CEO's estranged sister, a piece of his hidden history that no intern, no employee, and almost no one in the company even knew existed. And soon, Jordan would be pulled into their world in a way that would test his loyalty, his courage, and his sense of justice. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness, the simple choice to greet someone in their own language, becomes the spark that ignites a story far larger than anyone could have imagined. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Richard Greystone leaned back in his leather chair, staring across at Evelyn. His expression was unreadable, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed a storm beneath the surface. Evelyn placed her folder on the table. Her hands shook slightly as she signed, "Thank you for seeing me." Richard nodded. Though he wasn't fluent in sign language, he caught some of the basics. Years ago, when they were still close, he had tried to learn to communicate with her, but like many things in his life, work had consumed him, and the practice had faded. Now, guilt weighed heavy as he realized he could barely follow her. "I should have kept practicing," Richard said softly. His voice wavered, uncharacteristic for a man known for his ruthless composure. Evelyn gave him a look both gentle and sharp. "You should have kept in touch," she signed firmly. The words landed like a blow. Richard looked away, his eyes drifting toward the skyline. "I know," he admitted. "I failed you. After Dad died, I threw myself into building this empire. I thought if I succeeded, it would honor him. But in chasing that, I left you behind." Evelyn's eyes shimmered. She shook her head slowly. "I didn't need your empire, Richard. I needed my brother." For a long time, silence stretched between them. It was as if years of separation and unspoken words filled the room, pressing on them both. Finally, Evelyn slid the folder across the desk. Richard hesitated before opening it. Inside were documents, medical reports, financial statements, letters. His brow furrowed as he scanned the pages. "What is this?" he asked. Evelyn signed, her movements sharp, almost desperate. "It's about the community center. The one in our old neighborhood. They're shutting it down. The funding's gone, and the children there have nowhere else to go. It's the only safe place they have." Richard frowned, flipping through the documents. "And you're involved with this?" She nodded. "I've been volunteering there for years, teaching deaf children sign language, helping parents find resources." "Richard, this place is their lifeline. If it closes, dozens of families will be lost." Richard closed the folder slowly, his expression conflicted. "I sympathize, Evelyn, truly. But I'm a CEO on a charity. Greystone Enterprises doesn't." Her hands slammed against the desk, startling him. She signed furiously, her eyes blazing. "Don't you dare! Don't stand there with all your wealth, your towers of glass and steel, and tell me you can't help. You could save them with less than what you spend on one boardroom dinner. Do you know what it's like to watch children grow up thinking they're worthless because no one invests in them? Do you?" Richard swallowed hard, the weight of her words cutting deep. For a moment, the ruthless businessman faltered. He saw not just his sister, but a mirror of the boy he once was, growing up in that same neighborhood before ambition pulled him away. "I'll think about it," he murmured. Evelyn's shoulders slumped. Disappointment shadowed her face. "That's what you said the last time I asked for help. And the time before that. I didn't come here for promises, Richard. I came here for action." She rose from her seat, her chair scraping against the polished floor. Her eyes met his steady, unwavering. "You've forgotten where you came from. But I haven't. And I won't stop fighting for them, with or without you." Before Richard could respond, She turned and walked toward the door. Downstairs, Jordan was still at the reception desk when the elevator opened again. Evelyn stepped out, her face pale but resolute. She clutched her folder tightly, her movements brisk. Jordan noticed the tension immediately. He rose and signed gently. "Are you okay?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Her hands moved quickly. "He doesn't understand. He doesn't see what's at stake." Jordan frowned. He didn't know who she had met upstairs, but it was clear the conversation hadn't gone well. He signed back, "Don't give up. Sometimes people take time to change." Her lips curved into a faint, grateful smile. "You're kind. Thank you." At that moment, Richard emerged from the elevator. His presence filled the lobby, commanding, intimidating. Employees instinctively straightened, whispers rippling across the room. Most interns avoided eye contact with him, fearing his reputation for ruthless efficiency. But Richard's eyes weren't scanning the lobby. They were fixed on Jordan. The young intern stiffened under the CEO's gaze. Had he done something wrong? His heart pounded as Richard approached. "You," Richard said, his voice deep and deliberate. "You greeted her, didn't you?" In sign language. Jordan nodded nervously. "Yes, sir." She seemed lost. "So I." Richard studied him for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then, to Jordan's shock, the powerful CEO said quietly, "Thank you." The words felt strange coming from him, as though he wasn't used to saying them. Employees nearby glanced at each other in disbelief. Richard Greystone, thanking an intern? Evelyn turned, watching the exchange with interest. For the first time, she saw a flicker of possibility. Maybe the spark of humanity she remembered in her brother wasn't completely gone. Jordan, still stunned, managed a respectful nod. "Of course, sir. It was nothing." Richard shook his head. "It wasn't nothing. You saw her. You respected her. That matters." He glanced at Evelyn, then back at Jordan. "What's your name?" "Jordan Harris, sir." Richard's gaze lingered on him. "Jordan, I'd like you to join me upstairs tomorrow. 10 o'clock. There's something I want you to sit in on." Jordan's mouth fell open slightly. "Me, sir? I'm just an intern." "Exactly," Richard replied. "Which means you see things the rest of us overlook. Don't be late." With that, he turned and strode out of the building, his entourage scrambling to follow. Evelyn watched him go, then looked at Jordan. She sighed softly. "You've made an impression on him. That's rare." Jordan exhaled, still dazed. "I don't even know what just happened," he muttered. Evelyn gave him a small knowing smile. "You'll find out soon enough." That night, Jordan lay awake in his small apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling. His mother's voice drifted from the kitchen, humming as she prepared tomorrow's meals. His sister was in her room, finishing homework. The sounds were familiar, grounding, but his mind was elsewhere. Why had the CEO singled him out? What meeting could possibly require the presence of an intern? And who exactly was Evelyn Carter? Jordan didn't know the answers yet, but he had a feeling he was standing at the edge of something bigger than himself, something that could change not only his life, but perhaps the lives of many others. And in the shadows of his uncertainty, one truth glowed like a quiet flame. Sometimes, the simplest act of kindness sets into motion events that no one could predict. The next morning, Jordan dressed carefully in his best suit. His stomach churned with nerves as he made his way back to Greystone Enterprises. He tried to calm himself, reminding himself to stay professional. At precisely 10 o'clock, he knocked on the door of the CEO's office. "Come in," Richard's voice called. Jordan stepped inside, his heart pounding. Evelyn was already there. She turned and smiled at him warmly, her eyes carrying both gratitude and hope. Richard gestured toward a chair. "Sit down, Jordan. Today, you're going to hear a story most people in this company don't know, and after you've heard it, I'll need your honest opinion." Jordan sat, hands clasped tightly as Richard began to speak, and as the CEO unraveled the tangled history of family, ambition, and betrayal, Jordan realized he wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was about to become part of it. The air inside the CEO's office was heavy, almost suffocating. Richard Greystone stood by the window, gazing out at the sprawling city. His reflection in the glass looked older than he admitted to himself, lines carved by decades of ambition, eyes shadowed by sacrifices he'd chosen and ones he'd forced upon others. Behind him, Evelyn sat patiently, her folder once again on her lap. She watched her brother with a quiet mixture of hope and caution. Jordan sat across from her, fidgeting slightly in his chair. His presence in this room still felt surreal. Just yesterday, he had been a nameless intern trying to survive. Now, the most powerful man in the building was about to confide in him. Richard finally turned. His voice was low, deliberate. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here, Jordan." "Yes, sir," Jordan admitted. "I don't really understand." Richard walked back to his desk and sat. "Because you represent something this company has forgotten: humanity. When my sister walked into this building yesterday, not one person saw her. Not the guards, not the secretaries. They saw an inconvenience, someone who didn't fit their world. But you saw her. You spoke her language. That matters." Jordan blinked, caught off guard. He didn't know what to say. "I just didn't want her to feel alone," he murmured. Richard gave a short, humorless chuckle. "Exactly. That instinct, that kindness, is what I've lost." Evelyn's hands moved quickly. "Not lost, Richard. Buried. There's a difference." Richard glanced at her, the faintest shadow of a smile crossing his lips. Then he turned back to Jordan. "She's here because she wants me to save a community center in the neighborhood we grew up in. I've been reluctant." "Reluctant?" Evelyn signed sharply, her expression fierce. "You've been dismissive." Richard ignored the sting in her words. He leaned forward, folding his hands. "I want your opinion, Jordan. Not as an intern, not as an employee, but as someone who's lived the struggle. Tell me, should I invest in this place? Or should I keep my resources focused on what I built?" Jordan froze. His mind raced. This was no ordinary question. The CEO of Greystone Enterprises was asking him, a broke kid from the other side of the city, to influence a decision that could change hundreds of lives. He thought about the cracked sidewalks in his neighborhood, the kids hanging out on corners because they had nowhere else to go. He thought about his sister, how hard it was for his mother to keep her safe and focused on school. And he thought about his cousin, how isolated he felt before Jordan learned sign language to connect with him. Slowly, Jordan found his voice. "Sir, with respect, money doesn't mean much if it doesn't help people. You've already proven you can build towers and empires. But what will they say about you when you're gone? That you made billions? Or that you gave kids hope where no one else would?" The room went still. Evelyn's eyes glistened. She signed softly, "Yes, that's it." Richard leaned back, silent. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were distant, lost in thought. Finally, he exhaled. "You sound like our father," he said quietly. Evelyn stiffened, surprised. Richard rarely spoke of their father, a man who had been stern, but deeply principled. "He used to say," Richard continued, "the measure of a man isn't what he builds for himself, but what he leaves for others. I thought I honored him by building this company, but maybe I've been running from him all along." Evelyn reached across the desk, placing her hand over his. He didn't pull away. Jordan watched, realizing he was witnessing something far more personal than a corporate decision. This was family fractured, scarred, but still bound by ties neither time or pride could sever. 2 weeks later, word spread like wildfire through the city. Greystone Enterprises announced a multi-million-dollar investment into community development projects, starting with the struggling neighborhood center. The press painted it as a brilliant PR move, a sign of corporate social responsibility, but those who knew the truth understood it was something deeper. Richard personally attended the opening ceremony of the newly funded center. Cameras flashed as he cut the ribbon, but his gaze wasn't on the reporters. It was on Evelyn, standing proudly beside him, her hands signing her gratitude. And beside her, almost hidden in the crowd, was Jordan. He wasn't in a tailored suit like the executives. He stood in his modest clothes, clutching a program for the event. Yet Richard sought him out, nodding once in silent acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, Evelyn found Jordan by the basketball courts behind the center. Children were already playing, laughter ringing through the air. She tapped his shoulder to get his attention, then signed warmly, "You changed him. I don't know how, but you did." Jordan shook his head. "No, ma'am. He changed himself. I just reminded him what mattered." Evelyn smiled. "Humility and wisdom. You'll go far." Before Jordan could reply, Richard approached. The CEO looked oddly out of place here, his expensive shoes sinking slightly into the worn asphalt. Yet there was a softness in his face that hadn't been there before. "Jordan," he said, his voice steady, "I owe you more than thanks. You've given me perspective I thought I'd lost forever." He paused, then added, "When your internship ends, there will be a place for you, not just as an employee, as someone I can trust." Jordan's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep speaking the truth," Richard replied, "even when it's uncomfortable, especially then." Jordan swallowed hard, his chest swelling with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Yes, sir, I promise." Evelyn placed a hand on her brother's arm, then looked at Jordan. "This isn't just about a job, Jordan. It's about changing the world one choice at a time. Don't forget that." He nodded firmly. "I won't." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jordan stood at the edge of the court, watching the children play. Their laughter carried on the breeze, mingling with the distant hum of the city. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to dream not just of survival, but of making a difference. He thought back to that morning in the lobby, when a nervous intern had simply greeted a stranger in sign language. At the time, it had felt small, almost insignificant, but now, he understood. Kindness, no matter how small, ripples outward in ways we can never predict. Because that one gesture had brought a sister back to her brother. It had reminded a powerful man of his humanity, and it had opened doors for a young man who believed he had none. Jordan smiled, the weight of his journey pressing against him, but no longer crushing him. He wasn't just an intern anymore. He was a voice, a bridge, a reminder that even in the tallest towers of power, the heart still mattered. And as night fell, he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning."